All right, I'd like to welcome everyone to this first council meeting of 2020, and I'd also like to welcome Councillor Bailey. She's going to be observing the first half of today. We will then be swearing her in for the second half, and she'll be participating. So you see me skip over her. It's not that I'm trying to exclude her. It's just kind of letting her in gently so that she can get her feet under her. So
Thank you.
We'll start with disclosure of pecuniary interests. Seeing none. All right. And we might as well. We'll ask the delegation to come down because if we get into any of the reports, it's going to be quite lengthy. So if you can take a few minutes to come down and get set up, and we'll start you at 9:05 or as close to as possible, please. Welcome. You can start whenever you're ready.
Sure, thank you. I didn't know I was on deck quite that fast, but welcome everyone. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I see a few more new faces around the crowd here. I've been here a few times, as some know. So we're back again asking for assistance. But I hope you all had a great Christmas and a Happy New Year. We're very happy to be back again, and thank you very much for listening to our presentation. You'll see behind me that we have a whole lot of people from the lake. Many of them sit on the board, and some of them are lake residents. They're here to make sure that I give a good presentation, because my term will be up again. So they're going to ask me to probably come back again next year, I hope. So my presentation, we came here right over the Christmas period. I was going to drop it off earlier, so I apologize for not getting that in quicker to you. But I hope that the handouts that we have for you, you can follow through with that. And just to give you a little bit of history of where we are, the first page on our presentation really kind of talks about where we've been. So in 1997 is when this association actually was formed in a more formal setting. But there have been people working on this project for long before that. At that point in time is when we came together. We bring all the neighborhood associations together on the lake, and we decided to form this group to be basically in charge of what we're doing to help restore and beautify Puslinch Lake. So 1997 is when that all happened, and in 1999 we had Andy Genza, who did the initial plan for the lake to help us come up with a plan of how we are going to be able to restore this lake to the best of our ability. So since that time, we've been spending all those years and 20 years basically of dredging this lake to create some deep holes into the lake to help with one of the restoration projects. It's not the only project, but it is the most expensive one that we have on our deck in order to restore the lake. So since that time, we've had a hydraulic dredge that we started with, and then we moved to a barge and an excavator. And that has really helped us really tremendously increase the amount of sediment and so forth that we pull out of the lake every year. So to date, we've removed approximately 240,000 tons of material out of the lake. That is huge. A rock truck, if you can picture a rock truck, it's about 2 or 3 times the size of a regular dump truck. And there were about 1,500 truckloads that we pulled out of there last year. So that's amazing. And in that length of time, outside of the actual donations that have been made to help us purchase equipment and things like that for the lake, we've raised about $1.4 million through private donations, through fundraising events, and through some of the grants that we receive. So to our knowledge, we are the only ones in North America that are actually attempting to clean out a lake of this size and do it through private work. So we're very proud of that. It's been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. Most of the people behind me have been involved in it for all that time, and they will tell you horror stories as well as great stories about what we managed to accomplish over that period of time. So your grant is very, very important to us as part of this restoration program. We operate on a budget of somewhere between $150,000 and $200,000 a year. And the only reason we can even do it on that small of a budget, when you think of the scale of what we're trying to do, is that the actual dredging company and so forth is run by a lake resident who has plowed a ton of his own time and money and efforts into this to make it work, as well as some donations, as I said, on the actual equipment purchases and things like that as well. Because otherwise this project would never have been off the ground. So fortunately, 2019 was one of the best years that we've ever had for dredging, despite some big challenges. So the 2019 dredging update is just to give you an idea of what we've done as of last year. Some of you were here last year when I did the presentation, so this is just to bring you a little more current. So we spent about $200,000 on upgrading and restoring our equipment. The barge itself needed to replace a couple of the hulls on there. The tugboat needed work again. Numerous things. We had to put a thruster on. Some of the power packs that we used to raise and lower the spuds on the side of the dredge had broken down. So the dredging company itself invested in another $200,000 into the equipment. But that investment has meant that we could actually do a whole lot more work because the thrusters on the front to help steer it greatly improved our maneuverability to get around the lake and work in periods of time when there's slightly higher wind, because wind is really a drawback to our operation. There's days you can't get out at all. So that meant that we were actually about 40% more efficient in our dredging process than what we would have been. And we managed to do that despite the fact that, last spring, if you recall, was extremely wet. So we were hoping to do a lot of the work on our pit to move some of the sediment from previous years to stockpile that so that we created more space. All of that was thrown back months, and in fact, some of it we couldn't do at all because of the fact that everything was so extremely wet. We couldn't get our equipment into the area. We couldn't bring cranes into the area to do some of the work on the dredge itself. So we actually lost a couple of months of our operation that we would have liked to have gotten into simply because of weather alone. And then that compounded in all the work that we needed to do on the barge as well. So all of that got thrown back because, again, we couldn't get equipment. We couldn't get things hauled in and out of there. So it made for a very slow start to us, and we were very leery of what are we going to be able to do this year. And then when the weather cleared up and we got going on it, we managed to have a record year for us. So that's all exciting news. So again, we removed last year alone about 37,500 tons of material out of the lake itself, a great success. We've accumulated a very large stockpile of sediment now. So one of the things today I would like to ask council through your contacts and perhaps through the township itself is that we have a lot of material sitting there. And if you can help us with some contacts and so forth that we could use this material. And it's great for farmland, it's great for restoration. In fact, last year, one of the interesting things is we had a company from Hamilton area for an environmental cleanup that they had to do. We're interested in our soil. And in order to do that, we had to have its where am I here on my notes? SGS? Yeah, SGS Labs had to come in and again do another test on our material. So we have the highest rating of any soil in Ontario. So that's good news. It just means that we've had our soil tested time and time again, and it's passed with flying colors every time. And that was always one of the questions about what could be in the sediment as we stockpile it and so forth. We have a large stockpile of it now that we would like to move. So if you could help us in any way at all with opening up some of those contacts. We had some of those contacts last spring as well. We were going to be moving some soil, and then the wet weather hit. And we couldn't even get the material off our holding area. So we're hoping for a much drier spring this year. Not like Australia, but drier. So if we can ask your help, if there is anything, the company that's involved in that is Kettle Lake Soil. They're the ones who are doing all of it. There is a website for them. The phone number is there and some of the information. I'm more than happy to give you all of that testing material if that would help at all. And if we can get some assistance from you, that would be greatly appreciated. So 2020, what are our plans? So the start of the 2020 season will see us complete the deep hole on the northeast side of the lake. We did get a large portion of that hole dug last year. However, the ice came in early again this year. So that means that we had to take the barge and all our equipment off the lake, so we haven't got that completed yet. And then 2021, the plan is to move further west, basically in front of where the old Marina restaurant is, and dig another deep hole there. And then we also hope to build a channel between Soame Island, and I'll show you on the map in a second, between Soame Island and Big Island to increase the safety and the navigation of the lake itself. 2022, the dredging company that's been operating all of our equipment over these years now has said that that is the final year that they want to be in operation. Huge investments from the operators, I've already said, so by that time there will need to be another huge investment in the equipment, so it's time to basically retire that. I can't see anybody who's willing to step up and invest $250,000 to $500,000 in equipment to keep this dredging equipment alive. So we think that that's going to be the end of the dredging of the lake itself. So we've got a lot that we want to complete before that time. But that doesn't mean that the PLCA now closes shop and walks away, because there's lots of other projects around the lake that we need to do, including looking at microbes and things like that. Still the reward program to coordinate things, and anything we can do to continue to clean and beautify the lake itself. So, but that's the end of the big project. The next page is really just a map of the lake, so to give you an idea, on the bottom right-hand corner is where we were dredging in 2019. That's where all of the sediment came from. It was some of the best and heaviest sediment that we managed to pull out of there, so it made the dredging so efficient, and which was great to see. 2020, we're on the top right of the lake, doing another deep hole there and digging that out, as well as some shoreline cleanup along that area. And then just to the middle north of the side of that map there, 2021 is where we need to complete the last big deep hole. And then the channel in between, you'll see a highlight of Big Island, and there's Little Somme Island in there. We would love to put a channel through there because of the fact that the ski school runs a lot right in front of the marina, which means that trying to navigate around the lake itself when the ski school is in full operation can be dangerous. It's dangerous to the skiers, it's dangerous to the other people, and we're constantly trying to find time to get around. So before we pull the whole dredging equipment off the lake entirely, we'd love to dig a channel through there. Then we have two ways to get from the east and the west side of the lake for safety reasons, as well as just, general beauty of the lake itself. I have a couple of pictures in here as well of the lake itself, of what it did look like, basically only 2007, which isn't that long ago. You can see it basically looked like a swamp. We've done an amazing amount of work since that time. The lake is far better than what it was before that. We have our financial statements involved in here, so you can take a look at that when you have some time. And then the last pictures are just some of the use of the lake itself and some of the history of the lake itself. This lake has been a high point of Puslinch Township for a long time, long before I ever got here. And it's got a long history, including old resorts and a paddle wheeler that used to navigate around the lake, taking people to the resorts. So it is an integral part of where we live. We're very proud to be there. We're proud to be helping out with this project. And anything we can do to help assist that is great. And I now throw it open to questions from council.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation again. I met with one of the residents in the gallery, I don't know, a few weeks ago, and I reached out to some of my contacts about your fill issue, and he was more than willing to receive the fill, after having some testing done, because I'm not a farmer, but I guess it has to be the right pH and some other stuff, right? But it sounds like you have good fill. And he has a lot of room for it, and he was talking 1,500 loads kind of thing, but he's not willing to pay the trucking.
Yeah. That is our challenge. We have a lot of, Mayor Seeley, we have a lot of people who would be interested in that, as long as we truck it, and the trucking costs are tremendous. So again, we're basically just trying to break even on the sale of this material. We're not looking at making a lot of money, but we can't afford to truck it as well, because then we're in the hole.
Yeah.
So, but
okay,
anything we can do to help, or if you've got that contact, please forward it on.
Yeah, I think you've done great work with the lake. I mean, those pictures say 1,000 words, as the saying goes. It's tremendous. So I'll open up to council. Councillor Bulmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. Thank you
Good morning.
for coming. Well, you and I have been talking about this for a long time. Not as long as the paddle wheel. Not back that far back, but yeah, I got to say, I'm so glad we're past those days of the hydraulic dredge. That was difficult on both sides of the table. And that was enormous challenges, and it just speaks volumes to the fortitude of the people on the lake that they, got past all that, came up with a better solution, and it certainly cleared the way for a successful project. Yeah, I reached out. You may recall I got those test results a couple years from you, and yeah, lots of people are willing to take it. They want it for nothing. That's a big challenge. So I'll ask out from I have some other contacts, maybe in landscape businesses, and Arrogate might be interested. But yeah, it's always that cost piece. I'm glad to see. I thought I'd be glad to hear there's an end to this. But as I reflect back on the benefits that I've come to understand that this project has beyond the residents who live right on the lake, it's kind of sad to hear it coming to an end. When I think about all the people that were involved in when you think about the benefits in the long term, the people that put a lot into this, some of them aren't even around the lake anymore.
That's true, and some of them still support it.
Yeah. So this is a legacy project. It's not just for those, I can remember this first started, you can remember it's just so the people can get their boats into their own docks. And that's certainly not turned out to be the case. This is, when I think of the benefits that you've extended to Ellis Chapel, the partnerships you've made in the community to help them make more of their facility with, tours around the lake as part of wedding services and things, it has a broader benefit and a lasting benefit. So it's kind of a mixed blessing. Come to an end, it's a success, but at the same time, it's the end of a positive era. So thank you for your presentation. And I fully support seeing this all the way through. So
Great, thank you.
Councillor Goyda?
Thank you. Thanks for coming today.
Thank you.
I'm always really amazed when I see, last year was the first year that I had seen some of those pictures of when way back when, and the result of all your work. And I'm just so amazed that people are just volunteering their time and their money, and the amount of donations that you're able to receive. It's really quite remarkable. So great job on that. And I think some of the events that you put on, I'm not sure if this past year was the first year you did the St. Patrick's Day event or not, but I know I tried to get tickets and it was sold out. So good job. Good job on that.
You're more than welcome.
I'm it's sad to hear that it's coming to an end, because I don't know enough of the science behind it, whether that sediment will start to build up and accumulate again. But I'm hopeful that your efforts will be long lasting, and I know you work with other biological solutions as well to try and keep the sediment to a minimum. But I think that you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Councillor Spoulos?
Yes, thank you very much for keeping up the good work. It's you drive by, you see the lake. It's really nice to see having a meal in a restaurant and watching all the activity on the lake. It's really nice. And with Justin Bieber there, it's even. But going through your financials, I was wondering if you try to get donations from some of the other grants that are available, like the Great Lakes Grant or grants of that nature?
We have Donna McKenna, who's on our board, has been on our board right from the get-go, is the person who's in charge of the grants. We do applications all over, unfortunately. Money is extremely tight, even for a lot of these larger corporations. It used to be a lot freer. And we have applied through Trillium Foundation, Shell, TD Bank, Royal Bank at times have given us some grants. They tend to be more hit and miss. So we keep applying for them. Unfortunately, we haven't had a huge amount of results.
Okay, I was wondering perhaps if the township got involved in helping with the grant applications.
That would be absolutely
I
wonderful.
don't know what we could do. Would you give you a letter of recommendation or something of that nature?
That would certainly help. We'd love that.
Because I see the good work, and I hate to see it being strapped for finances. Like, I'm surprised the GRCA hasn't come up with more money for you.
GRCA, one of the things I didn't mention ours, last year when I came here, we were all in the midst of renewing all of our permits, including the use of the GRCA land for where our holding area is. So we managed to get that extended for another 5 years, which is a huge blessing. So we do have the support of the GRCA in a big, big way. And through the Ministry of Natural Resources and the Ministry of the Environment, those are major applications that we need to have permits from, and everyone is on side. It's wonderful now because we simply say we need another extension. We're still in operations, and everybody basically goes, so tell us what your plans are, and here you go. So from the times we used to have to fight for years and years, in fact, we couldn't dredge for a couple of years because of the fact that it took so long to get the permits. But now everybody sees the benefit of it. And our soil has been tested. We've had the water wells there. The water's been tested. So they see there's no environmental impact to what we're doing other than a benefit to the lake and to the community and to the wildlife and the personal use that we all get out of it. So it's come a long, long way. But anything that you could do to help us would be tremendous and appreciated.
And last question, with respect to the soil, what are you trying to sell it? What sort of price are you trying to get it?
I can find out for you.
That's on the website, I can find out.
Yeah, Kettle Lake Soil is the one who's basically in charge of all of that. They're the ones who are doing, it's all screened now. We have a huge stockpile of screened material there ready to go. It's not a lot compared to what other prices are. All we're really trying to do with that is break even on our costs to get it in
Understand.
and out, right? So it's cheaper than anything else as far as I'm aware.
Great, thank you very much.
All right, yeah, thank you very much. We're going to be dealing with the grant applications this morning. One concern I have is that we have some infrastructure projects that haven't been placed into the budget currently. One of them being the sidewalks to Aberfoyle Public School. We have some community washrooms, and I want to make sure those are funded as well.
Yeah.
Because they are accessible to the entire community. So the way I look at it proceeding today is we'll look at the grants, and we might remove the Puslin Lake one until we know where we land on the full budget, right? Because it is pretty substantial, but it sounds like the support is here. Unfortunately, our Director of Finance is sick today. She flew, so we won't know where our final numbers are probably until maybe next week. We're going to try and organize another budget meeting, so you're welcome to all come back for that. So I don't want that to sound doom and gloom, but it's just, it's tough to approve everything and not know where you're at, right?
Yeah.
So, right, thank you very much.
And any other questions, please feel free to contact me or anyone else on the board. You can see we have a huge community involvement, so it's not just me out here who's asking the requests, it's everyone, yeah. Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. Moved by Councillor Ballmer, seconded by Councillor Spillis. The council receives a presentation by Art Zimmerman, Puslin Lake Conservation Authority, with respect to the grant request. All in favor? Carried. Okay, so we'll move on to the grant application program. And as council has seen, now the way as I just mentioned, I thought that if we could maybe ask each counselor their opinion on the applications, and if we can narrow it down to 2 or 3 that maybe there are concerns, and then if we have to defer those 3 until the Director of Finance is back, then that's what we'll do. So if you're comfortable with that, Councillor Ballmer, I can start with you.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me get to the beginning here.
So I'm on page 3.
Oh, that's okay, I've completely blown my agenda apart.
Did you? Okay.
So I'll try to follow by subject matter.
Okay.
Yeah, I have no issues with most of these, and I support the recommendation from staff regarding the request from Whistle Stop. We did the same thing, I believe, with the Optimist Club in previous years when their request included some funding for bartenders at Family Day. But regarding the inclusion of the PLCA request in here, going back to when this whole program was structured in terms of grant applications, we've always separated out the PLCA one from the rest because it is an infrastructure project in and of itself, and it really doesn't fit within the parameters that were envisioned for community group grants, that are typically $5,000 or under. So we typically have not included it in the numbers for that 0.5% of the, so we've broken it out typically in the past, or accepted that we're going to be over the 0.5%. So I have no issues with what's currently recommended in the report for the community grants, with the change suggested for the Whistle Stop one.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Goyna?
I have no issue with any of these grant applications. Really, my only question, which was intended for Mary, was about this limit that we have of the $19,874, and just my understanding of how this $25,000 fits into that. And Councillor Zapoulis, I believe, kind of answered my question that we've always treated that as a separate item. And as such, I'm okay with that, but when I first read it, my first thought is, well, why do we have this limit if we don't ever stay within that limit? But if we're treating it separately, consistently every year, then that makes sense. And I think all of these organizations have tremendous contributions to our community, and I really have no issue with any of them. But I do see where you're coming from with... There's also some other capital expenditures that we're looking to make, and you know, maybe if that means we only can give them 20,000 instead of 25,000, does that help us? Does that still help them? I'd be interested in seeing that, where those numbers fall.
Okay. Councillor Spools.
Yeah, a couple of comments. First of all, the Friends of Mill Creek, we gave them $12.50 last year, and my suggestion is to do the same. The reason is twofold. First of all, they have $47,000 of accumulated funds held in trust. And second of all is if you take a look at the 2018 actuals, they put in another $3,720 into the reserve. So I don't think they're doing as bad as some of the other organizations who are very close to the wire in terms of making or breaking it. Like the Aberfoyle Market, I can understand that. They're trying to improve the exposure on it, and you look through the financials, yeah, they're at the wire, and I can understand that. Some of the other organizations do a lot as well, and they're asking for less. Like, for instance, Sunrise, they're asking $42,000, and they do quite a bit for the community, helping the disabled community. So I have a suggestion that we put Friends of Mill Creek back to what they asked for based on the comments I made. With respect to the Pussons Lake Conservation Authority, yes, they do good work. I would like to see if we can do all we want to do and include it. So far, going through the budget numbers, I think we can do everything, but that remains to be seen. And the Optimist Club, in principle, I'm okay. The only thing for me is the accounting thing. They're asking for funds so they can get the rooms basically for free.
Exactly.
So there's an accounting issue here. It's a net zero to everybody. Is this a real expense that's incurred? Does it have to be on the books as an expense type of thing? Because if they're gonna reimburse us back, give the money back, it's a 0-0 type of thing at the end. So I was hoping I'm gonna ask the finance people if that would make sense to say it's a cost, but when in fact it's a net zero when you take everything out.
So my comment to Councillor Spools in regards to that is I believe that maybe the Optimists are not eligible for fee reduction because of their organization.
Yeah, they are.
Well, I believe there's something there that they have to apply for the grant because they've tried to get anyways, that's a good answer for the director. So Councillor Bowman, you believe they are?
They do. All they're applying for is the residual amount.
Oh.
This is simply just, I agree with Councillor Sapoulis' concern. All we're doing is creating busy work for staff. If we just gave them because for a period there was a time when all the community groups except one got their rents for nothing. And then they were allowed to, or got most of their use for nothing. And then the policy was brought into place where they could apply. They had to pay a reduced rate, but they could apply for a grant equal to what they ended up paying, so they could end up back at zero.
So why don't, going forward, we just ask staff to report back to give them the rooms for free?
Well, I think let's leave that to Mary
Yeah.
to come back and advise us. Maybe there's some accounting nuance that I'm not aware of.
Yeah.
Okay. All
So
right.
in principle, I'm okay with the funding for that, just the nuances of the accounting guides.
Okay, so I'd like to discuss the PLCA. Could we discuss that grant when we go into the report for capital and operating budget? Because then it would kind of fit with the sidewalks. And then we'd kind of have a better idea of the infrastructure that we are approving. So we'll separate that one essentially, just for, comfortable with that, Councillor Moore?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so that one's off. Mill Creek, do we need a motion to reduce that amount, or can we just discuss that?
I'm okay with what they got last year.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with that too.
All right, so we'll go to $12.50 for Mill Creek. Whistle Stop, I want to talk about that. To me, this is just an error on their part. Somebody didn't read the policy and
That's right.
understand that you can't put in for bartenders. I would like to support them at the $877.96. because I, myself well, 3 members at this horseshoe, if it is a horseshoe, have been part of Whistle Stop, and we know the costs are substantially higher than that. And as Councillor Zapoulis mentioned, they're on the wire of operating. I'll maybe even reach out to them and make sure that in the future, A, their application is on time, and B, they can put in for the same amount and it can just go to the cost of the dance, because they buy pop, they buy chips, they buy decorations and things like that. It's just wording as to why they're not entitled to that full amount. So I would like to support them at the full amount. It's $120 extra for a community group that does excellent work with children. So I'd like some comments on that, Councillor Bulmer.
Yeah, it's a shell game. I mean, but
It's their error. It's their error.
Yes, and the Optimist Club made the same error, and I recognize it's all one pocket, and we can't control what they use the money for anyhow. We could give them the grant, and they could apply it only for bartenders anyhow. I realize it's a shell game, so fundamentally, I don't have an issue with it. They do good work. My family benefited from that program, so I mean, as you say, it's a modest amount. So I'm not going to make a fuss about it. I just support staff's recommendation in terms of being fair. That's the policy is. They've caught it.
And I'd be comfortable with staff in approving the grant, letting them know that there was an error and this wasn't typical to approve it, and in the future we would expect it to be in line with the policy of some sort, right? So.
And if, to be fair, then if we would look back at the process that the Optimist Club went through, there was discussions back and forth. There was, included in our council package, I believe, on that, for that grant application, there was the discussion. We were included in the email trail of discussions back and forth to correct that mistake on the part of the applicant, to make sure it did fit within the policy.
So we'll make sure that.
The net result was probably the same.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Goyna?
I also fundamentally have no problem with that. I don't know if there's a way of wording it in such a way that we grant the full request, and put some kind of condition that it's not used towards bartending. I don't know if that's necessary, but just out of to support staff's recommendation and as out of principle, so that they understand that that's not the intent of that money. But the actual dollar figure, I have no problem with it as they've requested.
I'm fine with the dollar figure. I agree with Councillor Goyda. I would just say the funding should not include bartending costs, period.
To that? Okay. All right, so that will help Mary. That's, I don't see any more that I have left out, right? All right, we'll go on to our next report. Oh, I bet. Okay. Moved by Councillor Goyda, seconded by Councillor Zapoulis, that the report Finance 2020-004 regarding the 2020 grant application program be received and the council approve the grant allocations amounting to what's recorded in the minutes, I'll say, for, do I need to read each one of these? I'll read them anyways. Aberfoyle Agricultural Society, Aberfoyle Farmers Market, Friends of Mill Creek, Optimist Club of Pusslinch, we're not doing Pusslinch Lake Conservation, so I'll move that one out. Sunrise Therapeutic Riding and Learning Center, Wellington County Plowmen's Association, Whistle Stop Cooperative Preschool. All in favor? Carried. Okay. So we're going to move on to the items in the budget that they need direction from council on. And I believe that's on page 103, which is financial implications, current proposed tax levy impact. That starts with the recommendations for the gravel road study. Matthew, have I made that as clear as mud? Do you know where we are?
Yep. I'm not there yet on my paper, but I can.
Do you want me to start with?
No, I can chat if you want. Remember,
So the
114,000, I believe, or something was put aside for that.
that's the first one. Recommendations for the gravel road study, 114,300. And then there's the construction of a new sidewalk. Then we have compensation review adjustments, Cambridge Fire Service, contract phasing.
We'll
then-
do one at a time around the
Yeah,
table?
we'll go one at a time, and then we'll add PLCA to that, because that's kind of where I wanted to fit it in there.
So if we start with the gravel road study, I expect there's going to be some, based on the feedback we've been receiving from residents about the condition of our gravel roads, I expect there's going to be some recommendations regarding enhanced maintenance and maybe some upgrading of the condition of our existing gravel roads to make them better gravel roads, and maybe some recommendations on how to achieve that. So I would expect it's going to be necessary to have some funding in here to address those recommendations. The challenge is, I don't know what those recommendations are right now, and I don't know what the costs associated with them are. So while I'd like to have some money put aside in here to address those concerns, I'm not sure if this amount is the right amount or not. This large amount is needed to address what we're going to see in a report we have yet to read. So be my concern with putting this amount in there.
Okay. Councillor Goyda.
Well, I think that this dollar figure is probably, if we're struggling to get the levy in line, this would be the easiest thing to reduce or eliminate. But I think, as a council, each one of us on council here made a commitment that we were going to address the condition of the gravel roads, and I think that we need to follow through on that. Mayor Seeley, you had said something a little while ago, I believe at our last budget meeting, when we were talking about this loan and just the interest cost, the cost of borrowing $1 million over 10 years. And rather than, perhaps rather than borrowing the money and paying that interest every year, maybe we should just be setting that money aside into sort of like maybe we have our own reserve specifically for the gravel roads. And if we did that, then it takes longer to build up the money to be able to do that work, but at least we get full value of that money and we're not wasting it to interest. And I think it also shows a real commitment to those residents who have delegated, who have written emails, who have taken the time to phone, that we're not just sitting on this anymore. We really are trying to put some effort into it, but we have financial constraints, but that doesn't mean that we don't do anything. And so I know that we don't have that gravel roads study. We haven't had the presentation in the final report yet, but at the end of the day, I think that we should at least try and put that $100,000 or maybe even the whole $114,000 aside to be used for future, for whatever the results are of this gravel road study. And that would be sort of the direction that I would be hopeful that we could at least do that.
Councillor Spose.
Yes, I'm in favor of the 114,000 added to our budget. It's a commitment. I'm looking at it as a 1 year of a 10-year term loan on $1 million if we choose to go that way. Or if we choose to go what our mayor has said, we sort of accumulate it. To me, committing to 114.3 achieves, you can go either path once we get the results of the study. And I do think that we have to start looking at doing something with our gravel roads, and without a firm commitment, we're just being disingenuous to our residents who've asked us for support in improving the gravel roads. So I'm in full support of this 114.3.
Okay.
And we can make the decision whether or not we want to take out $1 million loan after the gravel road study results come in.
Okay. I'm supportive of that. Initially, I was a little hesitant with Councillor Spose's suggestion, but then I realized it got us to the same point because it gives us two options, which is always excellent to have multiple options. To speak of Councillor Ballmer's comments, I feel that there's two components of what your concerns are. We have gravel roads that maybe need more maintenance.
Yes.
But in my mind, this isn't putting away $114,000 just to maintain gravel roads. Essentially, this is the gravel road surfacing, like hard surfacing reserve, piggy bank, what you want to call it. And I would like to see, if we could, a report from the manager of Public Works. We've had some discussions that the amount budgeted for gravel historically in the last 4-6 years, maybe you could speak of it today, has been reduced. And maybe there's two components here. We need to start saving for whether we take a loan or build our own servicing program, but also restore historically the amount of gravel we're buying. So I don't know if you have those figures off the top of your head, for the gravel that we purchased.
So probably within the last 6 to 7 years, each year, we have decreased our gravel budget due to, obviously, restraints financially. Initially, we had a fairly healthy gravel operating budget of around 100 to 110,000. It has decreased over the past several years down to about 80. And it, in the grand scheme of things, it has shown, as far as the reliability of our gravel roads, that's just less material that's being put on them. And we are not providing a very consistent traveling road. So to begin, the first step would be either committing to establishing a healthier budget for gravel.
I agree.
Or committing some funds to start looking at problem spots as far as actually going below the gravel to explore options as far as subdrains or proper ditching, and basically go from there. Because again, the report from GM Blue Plan is going to be the same as previously as far as identifying our problem sub-base spots. And I know that they will be coming forward to recommend that do not put any type of hard surfacing on these trouble spots before we properly fix them.
Okay. So would we be able to receive the budget implications for increasing the gravel road budget line from 80 to 110 prior to the approval of the 2020 budget, or is that too short window for that?
I have made no preparations for that.
If council wanted to receive that information, we could look at what the previous numbers were to at least get it to what it was previously. I don't know how much work from staff would be required to get. We could look at some historical records as to what was done previously, but we could at least show you then what you need to get to that point. I think that's important, because reducing, like Mike mentioned, reducing your maintenance costs or maintenance expenditures is going to bite you in the end, right?
Yep.
And it seems that's what seems to be happening at this point. So if we could bring some numbers to you to see what it would take to get to that point, for sure.
I'd be, as a council, comfortable with that? Yes. You know, and my concern would be we build up a nest egg of money to pave a road, and then none of the roads are eligible.
Exactly.
So we have to kind of, Councilor.
When I say that we should be putting this money aside, I don't necessarily mean that it has to be to pave the road, but we do at least need to put the money aside to get even if the gravel road stays a gravel road, it needs to be a proper gravel road.
Best it can be.
But those are the things that I think will come out of that gravel road study. And then we can, if we've put this money aside, maybe it's not just to pave the road, but it's to fix the base. We fix all the bases first, and that could still come out of that money that we set aside.
Which I do agree in principle, but I also know that we have made commitments to the community, and all of a sudden we create an account, and then all we do is make gravel roads, and we're gonna be held accountable. But these are discussions we can have in the future. Let's start going towards that direction, and hey, maybe it turns out that you allot 25% of that to the gravel and the rest saving for surfacing. These are things we can discuss later. First, Councillor Bulmer had his hand up. Okay.
Yeah, I just want to echo Councillor Goyda's concerns there. My concern is that this is being looked at as a de facto pave the gravel roads fund. And I agree that we first need to make the gravel roads the best they can be. And we have to also have the discussion, as we know, we have figures that show us the annual life cycle cost of a paved road is double that of a gravel road. And I could never begin to think about doubling the cost of our roads that we currently have when we're struggling to maintain them. So if we all understand this is not necessarily a de facto saving to pave fund, then I'm okay putting the money aside. I just want to make sure that our commitment is to make whatever kind of roads we have the best they can be in the type they are currently. And deciding to hard surface a road is a completely different discussion, because that increases significantly our annual operating costs of those. And we haven't had those discussions as to whether doubling the cost of those, keeping those roads, is something we can afford. So that's the basis of my concerns about, it was just the understanding of what this money was going to be for. So if it's understood that it's for making the roads the best they can be in whatever type they currently are, I'm all for the 114,000. If it's a de facto saving to pave, then I'm not so sure.
Mr. Spoulos?
I think we're on the same page with respect to having money in the budget to do this. I'm not there with you, Councillor Bulmer, that this money is exclusively for upgrading paved roads, gravel roads. I look at it as one step beyond that, but I think we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
We all support the 114.3. Maybe our reasons are different, but for the time being, I think we're okay.
If I could, Mr. Chair, then I think where we're seeing is, I don't want it to be exclusively for paving to increase our road costs, and Councillor Spoulos doesn't want it to be exclusively for keeping it in gravel. So I think we're on the same page, just different sides of the same page.
Yes.
Well, I mean, the way I look at it is you can't do one without the other.
Exactly.
We can't
You
pave
have to
the
do one.
roads the way they are now. We have to fix the base before we can pave. So it's not like we can only do one or the other. We need to do both, and they go hand in hand, and that's what.
And I do agree, and Councillor Bulmer, you're mentioning that we can't afford the roads, but that's the intention of this. If you add 114 this year.
And more
as a
and
base
more, yeah.
budget, then 114, in 3 years, you have 380. Every
right.
2 years after that initial, you have enough money to rebuild the base and pave the road.
No, I'm all for
Right?
that.
But I just don't want that exclusion, and I don't agree with, anyways, so this is great, we're going in the right direction.
I'm not
and
talking
we
about
can-
excluding, I'm just not, I don't want to dedicate it to one particular outcome.
But, and
I think we're
when
on
the
the same
time
page.
comes that a gravel road needs gravel and there's 300,000 sitting there, I don't believe it's an appropriate use to spend the whole 300,000 on gravel.
right.
But that's why we have a great council and we can have those discussions.
Yep,
It's momentum in the right direction.
yes, I agree.
And it's something we can tell the taxpayer that we've listened, we're working towards it, and it's going well. Okay, so that one's, I believe everyone's comfortable with that one? Construction of the new sidewalk. So that's 60,000. And Councillor Bulmer.
Yeah, just I have one question about this. I support the idea of this and moving ahead with it. Our manager of Public Works mentioned that there may be some possible savings by doing this in consort with the sidewalks along Brock Road, and I didn't know if those savings were included in these figures or not.
I've had initial discussions with the county. They have sent their contractor out to give us a basic estimate. Again, it's going to be between 80 to 100,000, even with their contractor, is what they're estimating. I think it's a safe figure to move forward with. Around 100,000. I was a little surprised, but I'm not going to argue with them. It seems to be the most up-to-date cost.
Good. So this is reflective that it will come in within this amount then.
I'm comfortable in saying yes.
Okay, super.
Okay. Councillor Guina?
I have no issue. I think this is something that needs to be in there.
Councillor Spoulos?
I agree, it has to be done. The question I guess I would have had for Mary is where are we with respect to getting a commitment from the Education Board in terms of contributing to this cost? You may recall when we made the decision, we said this is subject to receiving funding from the Education Board.
And I agree, we need to know that answer. However, I feel that if they're not able to contribute, this is,
Well, I'm in favor of going ahead with it, don't get me wrong. It's just that,
Nice to know.
nice to know, for budget purposes, are we stuck with a $100K amount or a $60K amount? Because that's a 1% tax increase.
yeah, so ultimately, if we approve 60, and there's a $40,000 shortfall, then we have to do a budget adjustment.
Exactly.
Or, maybe Mary's wonderful at finding money, so maybe she can pull out a reserve, I'm not sure, or a surplus. There's options, so I'm comfortable with leaving the 60 in there, and hopefully the Upper Grand District School Board, they realize the importance of this, and hopefully they'll contribute on their part, because a large portion of this is on their property, right? It's the retaining wall to facilitate this sidewalk, so hopefully they see that and will support this project, so if we're comfortable with that, okay. So I guess that brings us to compensation review, which will have to be determined. We can leave it in there for Mary's sake for the next meeting. We have a closed session later this afternoon, which that'll be determining that. The Cambridge Fire,
Just want to say, I support this in principle. I looked at the report. The dollar amount doesn't concern me. It's retaining staff does concern me. I want people to stay.
yeah.
It's cheaper in the long run.
Councillor Bulmer, did you want to comment?
No, that's fine.
I agree. We've had some turnover here, and if we can keep staff, even though we find some great new ones, but it's always, Courtney, you've been working a lot the last 6 months, and and we truly appreciate it. And if this is something we can do to ensure that your career stays here and it gives you a better life, then that's what we should be doing. So, do you want to say anything, Councillor Goyde?
I did have a question, actually.
Councillor Bulmer?
Yeah, I don't know where I put it, but I just remembered that this number is in here this includes the number from the compensation review, I believe. But does it include, is it all of our vacancies? Are they funded? Does this number include all of our unfilled positions? Funding all of our currently unfilled positions?
My understanding is it does.
Okay, good.
Because the deputy clerk position was listed there in a salary, so I assume, even though that's not filled,
Yeah.
from what I saw, I believe. Mary can make sure.
Makes sense that it does.
Any other further questions? No? Okay, so the next one on the ticket is the Cambridge Fire Service contract phasing at 13.8. Councillor Bulmer.
Yeah, it's funny, I proposed this last year, and I thought we were on a great path, and particularly because I believe that the residents of that area did receive a sort of a compensating insurance benefit, but they don't, and so it complicates this. Sort of makes me feel like we should accelerate. I know last time I suggested instead of moving towards the 100%, we should move towards, maybe change our target of this term, moving to just 50% instead of 100%. And they pay 50% and the rest pays 50%. And I think I'd like to reconfirm that. I'd like to just adjust from going 25% a year to end it so that we go back, what I suggested last time, we go to where we did 25% the first year, but our goal is now 50% of it as opposed to 100%.
And I believe that number represents that, because if it were another 25%, it would be 30-ish thousand,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So this represents changing from 100% absorption of the cost over 4 years to going now to 50% in,
over 4 years,
right.
yeah.
And then the next term, you can carry on, so.
Yeah, and if just
Sorry, Councillor.
on a similar point, I noticed, struggle with this a lot, in terms of the other report, in the other report, there was a note regarding the satellite station property and equipment. I know it's not directly related to this, but the note in that other report suggested that that was only required if we chose to take over providing fire protection services to this area. We actually do still provide fire protection services to this area.
It's just different.
So that note suggested that we don't provide fire. So these residents, I guess I still fundamentally understand these residents are paying for two services, and they're not getting an additional benefit from paying for that second one. And part of me thinks we should probably ask them again if they want that extra service. We haven't asked that area in a long time if they want to continue to receive it.
So my understanding of that fire protection agreement, and the chief is in the gallery, is that was something mandated from the fire marshal's office back in the 70s or 60s. It was identified as a area of the township that the response time was too long, and the township was given an ultimatum, not an ultimatum, but a recommendation, either build a second fire station or get a contract service, and thus it was born. And then the council at the time decided to put the weight of that cost onto those landowners, but that was something they were almost mandated to do. Do you have the history on that, or maybe?
I can look it up, but
Maybe I can ask
Since
you,
then, there has been-
sorry, Chief, can I just ask you to come down on the table, just so on the cameras and the video, they get your audio?
so Mayor and Council, I haven't seen the documentation from the 70s, but what the Fire Marshal's office does is they do an audit and assessment on service levels and response times and that sort of thing. To my knowledge, they've done 2 more recent studies in that area, and it is their recommendation that we increase our service levels there because response times are so long for us to get our staff here to the station and respond to the West End. So at the time, to my knowledge, the residents did have a vote. They decided that they wanted the extra coverage from the Cambridge Fire Department, and that is for the first hour of fire services, and then Puslinch is called in for the remainder or the duration of that event.
Yeah, so my concern is if we go backwards, there's maybe a huge liability because the fire marshal's office has identified it as a service area need. That would be my concern. Those are something we can get reported.
Well, if I could, Mr. Chair, the service area need was beyond this area. This is only a sub-part. This is a small part of the area that the fire marshal identified as needing improved answer. That's a different discussion. But in terms of, I have no issues with this modified approach to transferring the reduced transfer, so it's.
Councilor Goyna?
Yeah, I agree. I was also under the impression that that these residents were getting a break on their home insurance because of the proximity to the Cambridge fire. But now knowing that they don't get that, I would also be supportive of at least getting to that 50% mark. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is 10%. Is that, does anyone know?
I think it's 12 and a half, so 25.
So, I mean, I would be in support. I don't necessarily agree that I think it would be a good idea to ask them if they want to continue or not. I think when we're talking about potential loss of life and property, we should at least keep it at what it is. So I'm perfectly comfortable with this number.
Councilor Willis?
Question, Councilor Gore, are you comfortable with 13.7? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. I'm comfortable with 13.7. The point I want to make is, as part of this efficiency review, I'm sure we'll be looking at fire services across the county, and hopefully with a review, we can get some additional coverage from Guelph or Hermosa or City of Guelph, or whatever the case may be. So I'm okay staying with 13.7, but not increasing it any further.
I agree. I'm okay with the 13.7. I mean, we're doing what we can. We're going in the right direction, and I believe the taxpayer would be happy with that. It's still money off their tax bill, and I look at it as that's the type of fire protection service we can provide to our community.
That's what we can afford, yeah.
You know, that's what we can afford. That's what works. And I agree with Councillor Sapoulis that there might be some opportunity there for some interagency agreements that, you know, we have a new CAO that's got some expert experience in negotiating these things. I think historically, though, we've approached these municipalities, these larger municipalities, and we've said we want to just pay the $4.75 MTO rate per response, and they've said no. I believe that's Guelph. Well, we also need to, in my opinion, is explore the per capita costs, because maybe this is the type of fire protection we can provide, is just pay per capita for that side of the township. And as well as Arkell area, because we build a satellite station on the west end. We still have a response due to issues due to geographic location on the east end. Now we're looking at building a third station. So I think we owe it to the constituents to explore those other options. And it's not that we're not supportive of the fire department. We understand it. We got a big township, and trying to get through Aberfoyle to respond to the hall is a pain. But so I know you guys are doing a great job, but we definitely owe it to the constituents to explore all the options during that review. So everybody's comfortable with the 13.78 going forward? Okay, excellent. All right, I'm going to take a 5-minute recess.
We finished with this?
No, I need to use the washroom.
Oh, sorry, I thought you.
I had a coffee, so I'll be right back.
No problem.
come back. So we still need to discuss the PLCA grant. Who's good at numbers since Mary's not here? So far, we've added 114.
Perhaps, Mayor, we can look at it slightly differently. If you take a look at the total adjusted municipal tax levy, that's $296,000.
Yeah,
That's all we added in. And then you take a look at the, where we stand tax-wise now, we're minus 2.92%. And if you take a look at the tax levy, a 3% increase basically will wipe out the 2.9% deficit, so we can afford all we have there.
okay,
So that's the way I look at that.
okay.
Well, or perhaps, Mr. Chair, a different way of looking at it, instead of, it's not a 3% increase, it's just don't lower the mill rate by don't lower it
Yeah,
by
we're not
3%,
giving a
stand
discount.
pat, and we get 3% extra just due to assessment growth.
Exactly.
So-
Just by me, Mr. Mayor, the other thing we have to figure in is the county levy. In other words, whatever they come up with will have an impact on our rate. And if it's more than our rate, then our residents are going to suffer. So I need to know that number before I can make a decision on some of the, on our impact alone.
Trying to remember what it is. Oops.
Yeah, but that has to be factored in. It's like we pay, 17% of our taxes are this, and they pick up something like 65% of our taxes. And
Well, I
if they're at 2%, well, that's fine. If they're at 5%, then that's going to really be a big number for our residents.
I know, but do you want to, because the county is responsible for larger ticket items and they have a larger increase, you're going to sacrifice our infrastructure?
Our future.
No, I'm not sacrificing infrastructure. I'm just thinking ahead for the next item. In other words, we adjust our tax levy to be neutral, and they come in with a number, and then there's a recommendation that we put in some money into the asset management.
Right.
And I can't put in money to that asset management until I know the total impact. That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, if there's room.
Yeah, and likewise, that's also plays into your concern about the PLC.
Yeah. And we can wait for that report from Mayor. I'm trying to remember, I believe the county's just under 3% because there was 1 full percent was for implementing the green bin program. So normally they're around 2, but we're a little higher on the county level this year because of that green bin. So it's going to be around 3. So we can wait. We can have all the numbers in. We can have the PLCA, and then Mary can report back to us. We're still going to need another meeting next week, but this will give her a good start, and there won't be as much to discuss for next week. So if you're
Yeah, I'm comfortable. So my suggestion is that we basically approve what we said and let Mary come back with confirmation on that, and then we'll see how much space we have for the asset management plan plus the PLC.
That's great. So, Councillor Bulmer?
Thank you. I have one question or something I'd like staff to look into before our next budget meeting, if that's okay.
Sure, absolutely.
Back in 2017, the province announced that the aggregate levy was our portion of the aggregate levy was going to double from 6 cents a ton to 12 cents a ton. And the industry was supposed to start collecting that starting January 1st, 2018. And we were to have received our first check of that new higher levy in March of 2019. However, the amount we received from the gravel levy went down by 20% from 2018 to 2019 when it was supposed to double. And I want to know why.
Yeah, it could be production. but yes,
Okay,
we
you
need
know
to
how much
that.
production would have to fall?
Yeah, that's a
for the
lot.
levy to double and us to get 20% less? I don't know what's going on, if Torque is just being slow in getting us that, but something's not right. That should not have gone down by 20% when the levy itself doubled. I mean, we saw extra pits come online, we saw the Honatl pit come back online. I know it's coming to an end and production isn't necessarily increasing, but I'd like to get an answer to that, to know why. Because the expectation back in 2017 is that we see an extra $230,000 in aggregate levy as a result of doubling the levy. And what we're seeing is we're only getting about $280,000 in total, not even. I guess down to 228. There's only showing 228,000.
Okay.
So that's a big hole for us.
You got that? Okay. Any other questions or comments on what we're approving?
I have some other questions. With respect to, if you go to look at the building department costs, which is on page 100, you can see that we're dipping into the reserves of $238,000. And our reserves, if you look at if we project on that, at that rate of drawing on our reserves, we're going to run out of money in a year or two. And I'm wondering if there's something that we're missing here. If you take a look at the 2017 numbers compared to 2019 and 2020 numbers, there's a $300,000 change. There's $100,000 extra for staff costs. There's $100,000 extra for engineering costs, and that there's $100,000 drop in building permits. So that's a $300,000 change. If we continue on that trend, we're going to be out of funds by 2021. So my question is, we should look into that and see if there's something that we should be doing right now to address that for the future.
Okay. Comments, Councillor Bulmer?
No, I concur. I looked at, most of the reserves are going up and down a lot, but some are, as Councillor Sapoulis has identified, are going in one direction.
Yeah.
This one, you can't do anything about it. It's, whereas the other ones, you have a little bit of play. I have a couple other questions.
Yeah, I'll just let Councillor Goyette.
I agree. It would be good to understand. I believe, my instinct would tell me it's because we no longer have a chief building official employed by the township, and we're contracting that out. But
Exactly.
maybe we need to revisit the idea of employing a full-time chief building official, and maybe that helps us. So it would be good to understand.
Yeah, and also the sharing of resources within the county. Maybe we should be looking at sharing some of the other resources. So to me, that's something we got to address,
Yeah.
some shape or form.
Okay, you've captured that in the report. Okay, you can carry on with your questions.
Okay, where are we? Levy. Okay, there's a comment on the bottom page 104. It says, "It's recommended the council, should council approve additional tax levy, that a portion of it be distributed to township's asset management discretion reserve in order to address the recommendations from the asset management plan." So I'll be asking, what percent does staff recommend? At one time, when this asset management plan came forward, was going to be 2%, and now we're going to take out a loan. This year, we contributed over $1 million already into the asset management plan. So I'd like to know where we are. I look at the numbers, there's pluses and minuses, and one of the other reports has showing that our total reserves dropped below the threshold level for 3 years, in the next 10 years. So I'd like to know what sort of numbers that staff would be recommending, so that we minimize any borrowing we have to do.
Councillor Bulmer?
Yeah, on the same note, there was a range that was recommended by the consultant in terms of the minimum reserve balance for the asset management plan. I think it was ranged from 2,000 to 4,000.
Million.
Yeah, sorry. I can only think about the amount of money I can have. And as we see that, right now we're closer to the 2 million than the 4 million. And if, as part of this assessment that Councillor Sapoulis is looking for, I'd like to better understand how, whether we're closer to the 2 and closer to the 4, how it affects the amount we have to borrow to address the shortfalls that are identified in the future, because it would help us understand the value of putting more into the reserve up front to save money down the road. And I'd gladly put more up front to give future councils an easier time down the road.
I agree.
But to understand where's the cost difference between closer to 2 and closer to 4. So maybe pick a few trench or, margins along the way. That'd be helpful.
If you take a look at page 254, you have the numbers there in the asset management plan. 2022, it's 1.83. 2023, it's 935.
Low, yeah.
2024, it's 590,000. Then it starts popping up again. So we're from 22 to 25. We're pretty low type of thing, well below a threshold.
Councillor Bowler?
Yeah, and just again on the asset management plan piece, some of the sheets that we had, some of the tabs in the update related to fire equipment purchase mentioned items being removed from the asset management plan in the future if they're purchased now, and it'd be nice to have those reflected in that report as well, that update. I think the SCBA cylinders and other things that were shown in the asset management plan to be staggered are now going to be
One purchase.
chunked, yeah. And to have those updates included would be great.
Okay,
I just want to see if Councillor Boyd has any.
No, I agree. The one thing I just wasn't sure of is I know that, like, when we have a surplus, a budget surplus, that we're typically putting that money now, moving forward, into the asset management reserve, and just, how that could or may come into play in the next 10 years as well might be helpful to know.
So that's where we need clarification in my mind. So the way I understand it, it's not saying it's the proper way, is it's almost like dealing with the optimists and providing a grant so they can pay back the fee. So what Mary has done now is implemented the asset management plan into the budget, and say there's 900,000 worth of capital projects. She dumps all the money into the asset management plan. That's where you see this 1.1 million. So you're actually that's not part of funding that 2 to 4. And then you just pull it back out to pay for your projects. So it's the difference between your projects and that 1.1 is where you build your kitty.
Exactly.
So then the surplus, so where we've contributed to add to the reserves, in my mind, is the surplus from last year. We added a 1% at the first budget meeting. So there was 470 plus 35, that's 500K. And then there was some other items that we opted as a council not to go forward on, so there was some leftover money. We put that in. So we kind of need a report to see what is actually savings money in the asset management plan and what is really just money we put in there and pull right back out. And that would be, I think, what council's looking for, is some clarity on. And that'll help us going forward. But I agree, I mean, in my mind, if the asset management recommendation was 3% per year, well, we've already far exceeded that, but we're actually not funding it as well as we need to.
Yeah, it looks like it's 3%, but it's not.
Yeah, so it'll be good for Mary to be able to bring some clarity to council on that, okay?
a couple of other questions. This relates to our new CAO. During the interview process, he mentioned that he has implemented successfully a electronic public engagement. And I was wondering if, what could we do budget-wise to start thinking about implementing this in the future?
What I could do if council's interested in that, when we implemented that, it was part of a joint project with the neighboring municipalities and with the county, so it was with a shared purchase, it was a lower cost. I could contact the supplier to see what an approximate cost estimate would be to implement it here, just so that we have a dollar figure, and I could bring that to your attention to take a look at. And then possibly what they could do at the same time, and then is come and give you a demonstration of it to see how the system would work. I could definitely do that for you if you're interested.
I'd like to suggest we do that. Okay, and then the last thing is natural gas. Again, our CAO has experience in implementing natural gas for residents' previous life, and I was wondering, to get on starting with the process of doing that, what should we be budgeting, if anything? Is it something that's first of all, collaborative type of approach? There's no cost incurred right now, or do you need to spend some money to get on with it?
Based on experience to this date, I don't think there'd be any money necessary at this point. It would be meeting with representatives from the industry, and then they would look at what the current legislation is in terms of flexibility they have for extending services. Then they would do some preliminary assessments as to what the potential customer uptake could be from the number of residents, businesses in the serviced area. They could then run some numbers to see what the cost would be to install the infrastructure. Then once they get to the point of that, we could look at, we could gauge public response to it. That helps develop a financial plan, and then at that point, they'd be looking at possibly some type of contribution or assistance from the municipality. So I think it's more of a, if that's what council is interested in, we could start those discussions. They could start their preliminary reviews and assessments to see what would be involved to extend the service. but I don't think you need to allocate any funds at this point.
Okay, that's all I have, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bulmer, do you have any?
Yeah, thank you. One of the pieces that was reported on had to do with the median assessment here in the township, and as I think right now we're in a good position where assessments are rising. I'm just trying to get a sense, and when assessments are rising, I'm always wanting to put more in reserves so that when assessments are falling, because they do go down again, we're in a better position to deal with things. But I was wondering if for our next update, if it would be possible to just get an update on where we are in the assessment, in the, what do they call it, the assessment cycle. It's usually done in 4-year blocks, and I've lost track of where we are in when the next block comes in, because they phase in over 4 years. And to get a sense of how far are we in, if we're on a rising curve, make sure that we're putting aside for the future. Help me understand where we are. Is next year an assessment year, do you know?
I don't know offhand. I
And
can't.
see, I
sorry.
couldn't remember, so it'd be helpful for me to know next time.
Pretty certain we just finished. I believe the new assessment comes in effective either it was 2020 or 21, but that'll be a great report to have.
Yeah.
I'm almost certain it just finished, and now because my house went up and they're going to graduate it in. So
Yeah. It'd be nice to know so that we can make sure that we're thinking about putting money away while assessment is rising, so when assessment goes down, we're not stuck double-digit rate increases in the mill rate. I did find my other note that had to do with operating expenses. There, in the report, it talks about total operating expenses, and it looks like last year was a 1.7% increase in operating expenses. This year's we're proposing a 1.6%. And while I wasn't sure, this is where I had the question about what's included in that 1.6%, whether that includes funding the vacant positions. I don't think it includes the compensation review, because this report predates the compensation review, but I'd like it's a good number to have to demonstrate that actually staff is doing very well at controlling operational costs, if it's included in everything in it. And I'm sorry, I don't know which tab that was on Mary's report.
We'll find it. That's fine.
Thanks. And then I got the aggregate levy thing, so thank you.
okay. Let me go to.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, I got one last thing. There's a recommendation for a student to help with the Heritage Committee, and it's a cost of $4,000 and change, and there's a note that it says subject to third-party funding. Again, this is a accounting thing for me. If you're getting funding from a third party, why isn't it as an expense here? Or is it something you require for bookkeeping or not?
Just want an explanation as to why it's in there?
Yeah, if it's going to be if you're going to get a grant for it, why do we worry as a cost?
It may not be a 100% grant, though.
Let's find out.
Yeah, we'll find out.
Okay, fair.
Did you have anything?
No, I'm good.
I might have one more. I have to go back to my other notes.
I have a couple that I would like to discuss, so that would give you some time. Are you okay? So there might be some questions for the chief, if you don't mind joining the table. So where I'm looking at is Schedule F, which is page 160, and it relates to the purchase of the rescue truck. And it's just confirmation of direction, chief. It talks that staff recommends a cab over, but in previous council meetings, we had recommended getting a price for the status quo replacement of the commercial chassis. I just want to confirm that even though this sheet here on Schedule F says staff recommends a cab over, we are going to see a pricing for the status quo replacement commercial chassis and a cab over truck.
That's correct, Mayor. So our intent, based on recommendation from council, is that we get 2 tenders, one for a commercial chassis and cab, and one for a cab over design.
Okay, and just my other question is in regards to replacement of the firefighter ensemble. There's a price set there, and I've lost it here, but it just gives one static price, and I believe it's around $2,800. Do we go to tender for that? Because I know there's multiple manufacturers of fire gear, and is there some cost-saving potential there too? Even though we're only doing 3 sets per year, do we check out the other suppliers?
Definitely, and it is our intent to probably change manufacturers for 2020. We found another supplier that I think can give us the same quality of gear at a lower rate, and we are looking at doing a joint purchase with Mapleton to do so.
Okay, so those are approximations, the costs, right? But you,
That's correct.
I'd like to see those, like, not personally, you know, when you come back and you say, yeah, we bought 3 sets, say, here's the high one, here's the low one, we went the middle ground, because to me, sometimes it just seems like we don't know if this was the best bang for the buck, and I don't know if council would like to see those numbers as well, but it's just nice to see, you know, that you're doing your due diligence. And I know you are anyways, but I know firefighter gear is so expensive, and there are different manufacturers out there. Councillor Willis?
I think that's a staff thing to do. But to me, the staff, we trust the staff to come up with a best outcome type of thing. And I'm sure if anybody wants to look into the detail, they're free to look into it. Staff will
fair
be
enough.
more than willing. I really don't want to get into that. Then my thing would be, okay, let's see what the road tenders are. Let's see what this is. And then we're
Fair
micromanaging,
enough.
and that's
Yeah,
not our
yeah,
job.
Fair enough, fair enough. So I just, yeah, okay, fair enough. That was it, chief, for me. Any other?
You mentioned the compensation.
Well, we're going to review that in the closed session, right?
No, there was a concern about the salaries.
Oh, I could, so that is found in our meeting this afternoon, so I wasn't sure if that'd be appropriate. It's in the quarterly report.
Oh, I see,
So
okay,
that's why
fair
I
enough,
left
okay.
that out. So it's just, are you going to be around for the afternoon meeting?
Yes, Mayor, I can be around for the afternoon. And if I could, I just had one statement. There was one update on our budget that wasn't previously disclosed to council. So when it came to revenues under other recoveries, we now included an amount to adjust for the services of Fire Marquee and also for the fees that we will be charging for smoke alarms and carbon monoxide alarms. So you'll see an adjustment on that line. Other than that, our budget stayed the same.
Okay, excellent.
It's all right in the report, $8,500.
He knows.
I know.
Thank you, chief.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? You had the one, Councillor Palmer?
Yeah, I had, there was a note in one of the reports about CP increasing their rates, not how much we get, but how much we pay them for services. I just wondered from our manager of Public Works what those services were that they charge us for. Is that for maintenance at crossings or something?
Yeah, it's all to deal with the, any lighted grade crossing. So that would be your flasher maintenance and anything to do with detection circuitry. Again, they deem whatever they want to charge us. We are really kind of at their mercy. And we're also in the same boat with Guelph Junction.
Right. On a related matter, Mr. Mayor, several years ago, there were a number of municipalities across the province were expressing concerns about the cash in lieu well, not cash in lieu, but the payments in lieu of property taxes they receive from railways. And there was an excellent report put together demonstrating that they were significantly under contributing to municipalities. And I wondered if maybe we could ask the CAO to bring that report, bring us an update on where the municipalities have managed to move that needle, or if they have at all, considering we've got the main CP line going through the township. I think it'd be an important update for council to have. I think Councillor Sepoulis, you would remember that report.
Vaguely.
Yeah, probably. Or maybe it was just around, yeah, it was a while back.
Changes with age, memory.
What's that?
Memory changes with age.
Well, I'm not looking for the paddle wheel today, so. There's one other sidewalks we did. I think that's it. I think. Yeah. I think we covered everything else. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Anything else from council?
No.
Good. Okay. Moved by Councillor Ballmer, seconded by Councillor Goida, that report finance 2020-005 regarding the 2020 capital and operating budget update be received. All in favor? Carried. Okay. Now we will discuss the completed capital projects. Any questions or comments on that one? Nope. Balances in discretionary and restricted reserves. We kind of just, oh, sure. Hold on one second. Going too fast. Moved by Counselor Goyda, seconded by Counselor Sapoulis. The report Finance 2020-006 regarding the 2019 completed capital projects be received. All in favor? Carried. Agenda. Now back to the balances of discretionary reserves. Any questions or comments on that one? Counselor Ballmer?
Yeah, just one quick comment. It was interesting, as I looked at a number of these proposed projects, it's typically we rely 50% of the cost of any of our capital projects coming out of our reserves, which really drives home the point how important it is to maintain them. It really affects what we can do in the future when we rely so heavily on them to flatten out the humps. But again, when you look at the totals over time of the reserves, there are some peaks and valleys. And I know staff is working hard to address those, so I don't think there's anything I can say today to change that, but it was important for me to see to understand just how much we actually rely on reserves on an annual basis to achieve the things we want to achieve, so thank you so much for this.
Anybody else?
No.
Counselor Sapoulis?
Yes, going back to the asset management table, page 254, and the statement above that paragraph talks about a contribution of $418,000 in the 2020 asset management plan. My question is that same amount carried through the remainder years, or are they understated by that amount?
So that's an answer, for Mary to answer, I believe, unless the CAO has
Yeah,
some.
so like for
I don't know
instance.
offhand, we'll look
Yeah,
into it.
so I'm not sure, because you're saying you'll do it for 2020, and are we assuming the same amount for the future years? In other words, are those numbers understated or bang on type of thing?
It looks like it's in relation to just the surpluses, because she lists each surplus by year and.
But it could end at this, it doesn't necessarily mean it's carried forward for every year. And that's sort of what I was asking about when we were asking for how much we should be contributing to the asset management, is we should understand whether this amount or this average or whatever is being included in these future projected balances.
Could you just refer me to that again? I was trying to write
Yeah,
down as you were saying.
it's page 3 of 6 of the report.
On 254.
Yeah, he's working with a hard copy.
Was he?
So it's 3 of 6. Okay, other question is on page 255 in our package. You have the cash in lieu of parkland, and we're saying that for 2018, the number was 113,000. For 2019, that's 190,000, and yet we're assuming 40,000 per year from 2020 to 29. And my question, is that a realistic number, given the fact that we had such big numbers in the previous 2 years? And then the other question I have on page 256 is to do with the Parks and Recreation DCs have a negative balance in these years. And I'm trying to understand, why can't parkland dedication fees be used to cover some of the expenditures that DCs cover? In other words, retain a positive balance in the parkland DCs. And then the third question I got is, it goes to the tables. There's a community benefits reserve that we're just starting up, and it has a $15,000 withdrawal already, and we're already flagging it as a negative for the future years. I'm going, well, what's happening? Why is there withdrawal for that $15,000 in 2020?
Okay,
That's all I have, thank you.
no problem. Anybody else? Okay. Moved by Counselor Ballmer, seconded by Counselor Sapoulis, that report Finance 2020-007 regarding the balances in discretionary restricted reserves be received. All in favor? Carried. Okay. Bylaws. Moved by Counselor Goyda, seconded by Counselor Sapoulis, that the following bylaw be taken as read 3 times and finally passed in open council. Bylaw 004-2020 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council for the corporation of the Township of Puslinch at its meeting held on the 2nd day of January 2020. All in favor? Carried. 10:32. Moved by Counselor Spillis, seconded by Counselor Goyda. The council hereby adjourns at 10:32
AM, yeah.
a.m. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, everyone.